A very good evening to all of you. I think a lot of people are
Good
having their
evening, sir.
first class with me, and a lot of you are having another round of me after having done civil procedure code, jurisprudence, and evidence. Okay, so it's a big batch today. So let me first ask all of you, how many of you are having your first ever class with me? You can raise your hands or you can write in the text box. Your first ever class with me. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So out of the 6 people who raised their hands, how many of you have ever seen any of my recorded lectures? Okay. So out of the 6 people who are having their first class with me, 2 of you have seen my recorded lectures, some of them, and 4 of you have no idea, right? So the format of teaching would be as follows. We will go strictly by your learning management system material, LMS material. What we will be doing in Transfer of Property Act is go module wise. Of course, it is very handy, and in fact, I would want to say compulsory, but since I have no way of enforcing that compulsion on you, I will say it is very handy to have the Bare Act with you. Please have the Transfer of Property Act, Bare Act with you all the time. We will be going as per your LMS material. One pet question which always comes our way is the LMS material by itself sufficient? Do you need to do any reading further? Do you need any commentary? So my answer is the LMS material is very sufficient. The Transfer of Property Act is a very interesting piece of legislation, while at the same time it is also very technical. So it is not very helpful to go into various commentaries. It will be fine if you stick to the LMS material and do that diligently. I will also be requesting one of you to play the host for our classes, preferably someone who has been doing so in the past, so that they can share their screen and the screen will be visible to all of you, and we can then go about the Transfer of Property Act. So is there anyone who would be willing to be the host for today? Yes, please. Anybody? Also, I would request the class to please have your videos on. What that does is that it makes it look like a class. I understand some of you might be doing something else, or some of you might even be ghosting me. I don't like being ghosted. I can randomly call out your name, ask you to read, and do things like that. And it is just that you've paid money, you've enrolled yourself into a LawSikho course, so it is better if you um, also take it seriously. A class is a serious affair. Of course, if you are having some problem, some particular problem, you can always drop me a private message and I will understand if you're not available, say, for a short while during the class. But to think that a class can go on like that is not very good. So I would request you to have your videos on, please, if possible. So 2 people have complied out of 18. 3, 4. Okay, good. I hope more of you do that. I'm happy to see more of you are doing that. Okay, so who can be the host for the evening today? Anybody who is good with screen share and can just open up the module so that we can start the class? Anyone?
Sir, I can be the host.
Okay, thank you, Kriti. You know how to access the LMS material, the
Yes, sir.
module?
Yes, sir.
Good, good. We will also have an introduction round for this batch in some time. Especially those of you who are taking your first class with me, I would be asking you to tell everybody about yourself, where you are from, whether you are a law student, whether you are currently working, what are your strengths and weaknesses as you prepare for the course. All these things I will ask you to share at a later stage during the class. So Kriti, you are the host. If you can begin the screen share.
Yes, sir. Just a minute.
Hmm. So the first module is Introduction to the Transfer of Property Act 1882. What was happening in India in 1882 in the 19th century? You can unmute yourselves and speak when you want to. Were we an independent country?
No, sir.
So we were under British rule. It is one of those archaic legislations, much like evidence or you know those legislations that have come before 1947 and have been prevalent. So what was happening in India in 1882? What was the need for the Transfer of Property Act? We will just be coming into it. But please try to understand that Transfer of Property Act is one of those legislations that is a very classical example of a hybrid Indo-English legal system model. Because we were under British rule, the British were bringing their legal system here. There were both pleaders and vakils in the pleading system. And when they were trying to bring in this concept of sale, purchase, property, they were doing something which was essentially an English concept, but they were doing it in Indian lands. Okay, if you can scroll down, Kriti. Yes, down, down. Hmm. So it's an 1882 legislation, and let's try to first understand the concept of property as they have explained here. The first thing which comes to our mind when someone says the word property is what? It is usually something immovable, land, right? That is what we think about as an impulse when we think of property. That is not a wrong impulse, but that is only a partial impulse. That is partially correct. It is not as if immovable property is the only kind of property. So property can be of various shades, right? We will try to understand it in terms of corporeal and incorporeal, and we will come to it. But let's read the introduction in your LMS once. Property constitutes one of the most important fundamental elements of the socio-economic life of an individual, doesn't it? Like people kill for it. It is very important. It refers to the highest right that a man can have with respect to lands or tenements, goods or chattel, and it does not depend on someone else's courtesy. The term property includes both corporeal and incorporeal property. Let's have a look at the diagram below. So if you look at this diagram, what are we seeing? Something which is corporeal and something which is incorporeal. Now, what is something which is corporeal? Quite literally speaking, corporeal is anything which is tangible, which you can see, which you can perceive by your sense of sight and by senses. You can actually and physically have a sense of it. That is what is called something which is corporeal. Whereas something which is incorporeal is something which may not have an actual physical on ground existence, but that does not mean it being virtual means it is unreal. It is also something which is important. It is very much real. However, it may not have a physical shape or size, right? So, a corporeal and an incorporeal thing can be understood from the sheer physical or non physical nature of something. So, that is what is corporeal and incorporeal. And within corporeal, property is of two kinds: movable and immovable, or real and personal property. Now, even within real and personal, and we'll do these categories one by one, there is real property and there is personal property. Whereas with regard to incorporeal, we are looking at essentially two categories: intellectual property, patents, copyright, trademarks, etc., and rights in re elena, which include leases, servitudes, securities, trusts, etc. Hmm. Can you scroll down once, Kriti? They haven't explained it. Yes, please scroll up. So if you look at this chart, I hope everyone is clear between the difference of in the difference between corporeal and incorporeal, the
Yes,
two
sir.
main heads. Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Now when we come to corporeal, जो हम एक्चुअली फिजिकली टच करके फील कर सकते हैं, हम देख सकते हैं, तो इसमें इन्होंने मूवेबल एंड इमूवेबल को एक कैटेगरी रखा है. Movable and immovable property is a differentiation based on the nature. So this phone is a movable property. Where I'm sitting, the land that I occupy is an immovable property. The house that I live in is an immovable property. Both of them have been kept into one category of movable and immovable, and both of them are corporeal. Now, when we come to real and personal property, usually what used to happen in English law is you used to refer to a real property as anything that is being spoken about land. Residence को वो real कहते हैं. Ownership of a piece of a plot of land, parcel of land, इन सबको real कहते हैं कि yes, you can demonstrate it as against anyone else. If you look at any person, you will see that when we judge whether a person is economically well off or not, we do it on certain parameters, such as how much property he has, what car he owns, what clothes he wears. So when we say how much property he has, that by that we are referring to real property. In terms of English law, please try to understand. ये कोई real or personal is not a specific difference of in the legislation. We are only trying to understand it conceptually as it existed in the English law and the general differentiation that has continued. So real property is one which is referring to usually land, whereas personal property are other kinds of property that are not referring only to land, such as a car, a nice coat, a good purse, branded pair of shoes. So all those things will come under personal property, whereas real property is referring to land in general. Okay. Now you might ask why real and why personal. Like, is a car not real, and is land not personal? So the answer to that is yes, a car is also real, a land may also be personal, but this is just a conceptual understanding of how we began to understand different kinds and shades of property in English law. So just know what they mean broadly and conceptually. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If anyone has any question at any point in time in class, you can always just raise your hand, and if I've not seen your hand, which is quite likely because there are 24 of you and you're not fitting in my screen, then you just have to unmute yourself and speak up anytime in the class. Okay. So that was real and personal. Let's come to incorporeal. Incorporeal is including intellectual property and rights in re linea. Now, if you know about intellectual property rights, say a copyright, usually for literary work, patent, usually for a scientific invention or an invention of a scientific process, then there are various kinds of IPRs, geographical indicators, trademarks. So all these different kinds of intellectual property rights. Say someone has a copyright over a literary piece of work. So is that copyright visible? Say like a piece of land is visible. Is a copyright visible? Now you may say that the certification is there, so they can show the certificate. However, that certificate can at best be the personal property of that person. The intellectual property, the value of that copyright is not on the piece of paper, it is of the concept that the person had invented or had written about. That is why he got that copyright. So an intellectual property is a very important kind of incorporeal right, where there is a right which exists, may not exist physically, but it exists nonetheless. That is what is contained within an intellectual property right heading. Whereas if you look at rights in Re Elena, here we are talking about leases, servitude, securities, trusts. So, for example, when we say we have made a trust uh, where this trust is running the school, now that trust may have its office, the trust may have its bank account, the trust may execute a lease deed. However, is that trust by itself a legal person? It is a legal person. But is that trust by itself an actual person? If a piece of property is owned by me, then I am the owner of that property. But if a piece of property is owned by a trust, then can you go and meet that trust as one monolithic entity? A trust may comprise of five people, decisions may be by majority. So it is not always possible to have all five people say the same thing. So to give a human shape or a singular identity to a trust is a very difficult exercise, right? So all these rights are called rights in re aliena. Why? Because they are not rights that are flowing in from the human existence of something. They are rights that are important, they are rights that are very well prescribed, but they are rights that are flowing in from the understanding of parties, from the operation of law. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Has everyone broadly understood what this is about?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So one thing,
Yes.
shares of the company, so that will fall under rights in re Alina, right?
Shares, yes. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Incorporeal rights in real life.
Okay, sir.
Please understand, sometimes when we explain these things, we say rights in re Elena or the incorporeal rights are virtual rights and not real rights. Or at times, while writing, it flippantly becomes or comes across like that. Try not to make that mistake. They're very, very real, just that they are not physical. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's scroll down. Yes, let's look at some history of the Transfer of Property Act. So, before 1882, that is before the Transfer of Property Act 1882 came into being, the transfer of immovable property in India was governed by the English principles of law and equity. A few points were also covered by the regulations and acts passed by the Governor General and Council. In the absence of any specific statutory provision, the Anglo Indian courts had to fall back on the English law on real properties. However, the application of English equity failed to do justice to the prevailing social conditions of our country. Due to the conflicting decisions of the various high courts, the law was neither certain nor uniform. Accordingly, the Transfer of Property Act came into existence to provide for a definite and uniform statutory law that would govern the transfer of immovable property in India. It came into force on the 1st of July 1882. This act has undergone several amendments from time to time to make suitable changes for further exposition of a definite law on this subject. Moreover, the amendments to this act have also necessitated the need for amending certain related enactments such as the Registration Act, the Specific Relief Act, Limitation Act, etc. So before I explain this history, let's take this question. Land and car are immovable and movable property respectively. Why the corporeal property is divided into two? Is it just for understanding the terms used in the British era? Yes. It is just for that general understanding of how the concept of property evolved in the jurisprudence of English law. That is why the divisions are made. Okay, that is not a statute backed division, the division that we did above. It was just for your sensorial understanding of what is property, just the sense of it. Okay. Okay. So if you look at the history that we just read out, it uses a very important term where it says the transfer of immovable property was governed by both law and equity. Can someone tell me what is the difference between law and equity? Is equity outside law?
So law is it has a statutory backing, but to a certain extent. So this a particular statute is in place which lays down the law governing a particular subject. But equity has to do more with the fact that the judgment of a particular court, it is governed by the conscience of the judge and by the whole notion of natural justice and equity.
So is equity outside law?
No, sir.
Why
But
not?
we can say equity is a base of law, but the thing is like the
Are
law
all laws
is
equitable?
so, the law is like compulsory applicable, but equity is not applicable. Like the judgment under equity won't be applicable in the court, right?
Yes, sir. I think also equity is the base of law, or equity is the basis by which law is governed, I think.
Sir, I don't think that equity is outside law, sir. Rather, I would say that equity is a mechanism developed by the courts to avoid rigors of law, sir. So for example, whenever due to the strict application of law, an unjust result in the view of court and unjust result happens, then they apply certain principles of equity on a case-to-case basis for avoiding that unjust result, sir. So even equity has a backing in law, sir, and it can't actually go against law. It is to fulfill the purpose of law and not to go against or contrary to it, sir.
Hmm. So do you mean to say that law by its own application will give unjust results?
Sir, in some cases, sir. So, for
Such as?
example, if I am like late in class because of 5 minutes, and there is this strict rule that and even coming 1 second late in class won't be allowed, sir. But if I have a genuine reason for coming late into class, sir, then the strict application of law in that particular case would result in an unjust result, sir.
Good, very good. That was a very good answer. Um, so all of you have said that equity is the basis of law. It is not outside law, right?
It can be said it is one of the base, not the entirety, but it can be said it is one of the base.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The,
So yes, what were you saying, Dinesh?
that we can say is like that. So the law is based on like one of the basis of the law is equity of natural justice, and we can say that. So in that manner.
Hmm. See, try to understand the body of equity, technically speaking, is wholly outside the body of law. So there, all of you were not correct. For you to assume that all laws necessarily start from the basis of equity was a naive assumption, because you may say all laws should start from an equitable point of view, but all laws need not start from an equitable point of view. That can take us back to jurisprudence and the entire positivistic argument of Bentham and Austin about separating law from morals. And in a way, what we understand equity generally is a moralistic principle. However, the word I was looking for, particularly in the answers, was justice. So while I can say that equity by itself is outside the body of law, but it is not outside the body of justice. And essentially, law is also a means towards the end of justice. Equity is also a means towards the end of justice. Equity and law may go together, they may not go together. But that does not mean that equity is within the framework of law. Equity cannot necessarily be called within the framework of law unless so specifically prescribed by the statute concerned. So, for example, if someone is late to class and the rule says even if you are 1 second late, you are not allowed entry into class. The rule may also say that for 5 minutes, teacher discretion operates. The rule may also say that if you are late, you can enter only with the prior approval of the principal. So, in this case, rule by itself or law by itself is accommodating equity. However, if there is no such rule and a person is being allowed entry into class, it is through something which was not in the body of law. It was in the body of equity. And law and equity both are distinct factors. Please understand. Please know this. A lot of us think that they are the same, or equity is the basis of the law. It may be, it may not be. There are bad laws also. There are unequitable laws also, retrospective applications, various things. For example, on equity, there is a cardinal rule of equity. I'm sure all of you would have heard of it. He who seeks equity must come with clean hands. If you have come to the court with an equity oriented prayer, then you have to come with clean hands. So there is an element of give and take and an element of responsibility in equity. Whereas if you look at law, today I was arguing a matter before the judicial magistrate in the domestic violence court. So there is a Protection of Women Act, Domestic Violence Act of 2005, which lays out the definition of domestic violence. Section 3 particularly includes both emotional and economic abuse. So one question that the judge was repeatedly asking me and my client was that if you were in a 6 years abusive relationship, why didn't you complain when you were in Hyderabad? Why didn't you complain when you were in Delhi? Then I had to tell him, sorry, you cannot ask me that question. The law does not impose an obligation on me to complain. The law, in fact, allows me to complain whenever I want to complain. So why could I say that, and why did the judge have to accept it? Because it was a statutory submission. It was a purely legal submission based on the statute. However, maybe what the judge was trying to do was a negative conception of equity, because the negative conception of equity is on a moralistic plane. So I don't want to go much into the jurisprudence behind law and equity, just to let all of you know that law and equity are two distinct bodies of law which may or may not intersect. Okay, so when Transfer of Property Act comes into the picture in 1882, transfer of property in India was governed by both law and equity. So if there is a school which is landless, say the land was on lease and now the landowner is not giving them lease, and this is the situation. So it may not be a legal principle, but an equitable principle that let that school get some land so that it can function. At the same time, if someone is dying and is passing on his property to his legal heir, that is a purely legal provision. And such a transfer can be effected through the principles of law. Sale is taking place. Such a transfer can be effected through the principle of law. Mortgage, various kinds of things. But then there will also be an equitable mortgage. So law and equity will have some element of coinciding, but that does not mean they are the same, or they need to be interlinked. They may be interlinked, they may not be interlinked. Is everyone clear with this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If anyone has any question, any point of time, you can unmute yourself or you can write in the chat box. Good. Okay. So this was the brief history. And if you notice one other thing in the brief history, towards the end of the second paragraph, any amendment in one act leads to corresponding amendments that are required in other legislations, such as the Registration Act of 1908, the Specific Relief Act, Limitation Act. Why? Because the body of law is all interrelated. And if there is any change in one, that may leave the other otois. So to give you an example, there is a section 52 in the Transfer of Property Act. Section 52 clearly states that if a lease is pending before a competent court, in such a situation, sale cannot be put into effect of that property. In fact, Section 52 operates in such a manner that it does not even protect the bona fide purchasers of a property that was in dispute. If you were to read Section 52, we will come to it later when we will be doing it in detail. Now, such a provision is there in the Transfer of Property Act. So, if tomorrow there is another local law which says that every sale of property, once mutation is done, a registered sale deed is there, that is a valid sale. That kind of a conception in the local law may be affected because of what is operating in Section 52. So that is why if there is any change in this provision, then the local law would also have to accommodate it. If there is any change in the local law, there may be a requirement for a state-based amendment of the Transfer of Property Act, for say the state of Uttarakhand or Uttar Pradesh or wherever you might be. Right? That is why all these legislations are in a way interconnected, interrelated. If one provision is giving time to file an appeal uh, within the Transfer of Property Act, and that time period is extended by an amendment. Now, that might have an impact on the Limitation Act, which has all the time periods prescribed. That is why all these legislations have to be read together. And we will also be doing that. In between, we will be reading some of the other legislations also. Has everyone followed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Preamble. The preamble of an act sets out the main objectives which the legislation intends to achieve. Accordingly, the purpose of the Transfer of Property Act 1882, as set out in the preamble, is to define and amend certain parts of the law of transfer of property. It is to be noted that the word consolidate has not been used in the preamble, thereby signifying that the act is non-exhaustive, is not exhaustive. Even with regard to its subject, the Act does not profess to be complete, as it relates only to the transfer of property by the act of the parties. The Act is strictly confined to the transfer of property by act of parties, but even here it is not exhaustive. For instance, it does not deal with the pledges of movable property, government promissory notes, policies of insurance, etc. So, if you look at the preamble of any act, that is, as the Supreme Court has also said in the constitutional context, the preamble is like the key to the lock, right? So it explains to you the cardinal rules, principles, the grundnorm of any statute. Now, the purpose of the TOPA, as set out in preamble, was to define and amend certain parts of the law of transfer of property. What does this mean? And what does the word consolidate mean? Consolidate means, you are trying to put everything together, trying to hold your chickens together. The moment you use the word consolidation, it means you are opening the possibility of some things not being there also. Therefore, the Transfer of Property Act is not exhaustive. There can be, and if I may ask you, why do you think the Transfer of Property Act is not exhaustive?
Because there is a contract law which also govern these kind of transactions.
Okay, contract,
Registration Act.
Also, sir, we have
registration,
land acts.
land acts such as,
Like every state has their land acts, like MP में है Land Revenue Act or Rent Control Act.
We have Sales of Goods Act related to transfer of movable.
interesting, right? So we have
And we
various,
have
yes.
Negotiable Instruments Act.
Sir, it talks about only the acts of parties. Here we can also talk about the operation by law, like the things which are done by the court.
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
And also, we have a whole body of local laws which are very much applicable. How many of you have heard of the term Sajra?
I have, sir.
So, a Sajra, what is a Sajra?
सर जिस पे लैंड का पूरा स्केच बना रहता है कि लाइक एक मॉडल बना रहता है.
A sajra is the
मतलब
बोलो बोलो.
ऐसा मतलब उसकी डिजाइनिंग पूरी उसमें बनी रहती है जिससे इजीली वो हम पहचान सके, मतलब वो तहसीलदार के पास जो जाती है, आई थिंक.
ठीक है, that was right in the general language. A sajra a is a Mughal version of a khasra khatoni, or the original map of an area. It is in Urdu. The land records of modern day Uttar Pradesh, modern day Uttarakhand, a lot of North India is coming from sajra. But then there is another kind of map called Biswa, which is also a unit of measurement that is applicable more Marla, like terms you would not have heard of, Punjab, Haryana. Then I'm sure there would be vernacular expressions in the south, east, west. So there are various kinds of terminologies that are in use, right? So it is impossible in a country like India to consolidate fully and exhaustively all the things about the transfer of property. Therefore, the act is not exhaustive, and it is important for you to know that at the very threshold. Also, the act also does not say that, I am a complete legislation talking about transfer of property. It is confined strictly to the act of parties. So, act of parties includes this kind of an understanding from all of your ends that the parties and their conduct becomes very important in transfer of property litigation. And we will come to it in some time. Let's look at the object of the act. So the object of the Transfer of Property Act can now be summarized in the following points. Number one, the Transfer of Property Act 1882 provides a definite, clear, and uniform law for the transfer of immovable property by act of parties, that is, transfer between living persons. Please note this, that transfer has to be between living persons. It cannot be between, naturally, it cannot be between non-living persons. It cannot also be between a non-living person and a living person. But you may have a question, what about wills? And when wills are executed, it is in effect a transfer from a non-living person to a living person. But a will is a document that is executed by a person when he is alive. And therefore, a will cannot be called a document between a non-living person and a living person. It is very much a document that is made by a living person. Okay? Unless you are talking about a forged will, which is made by people who are again living, but when someone might have died. Did you follow point one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Point two. The Act has modified and made changes in some of the rules which existed before this enactment. The changes were made so that the laws may be suitable for the socio-economic conditions of India. So that is why the Act came in the first place. Next, please. Priti, if you can scroll down. The Transfer of Property Act has completed the code of the law of contract. Before this act, although there was an enacted law for contracts, there was no enacted law for the transfers which used to take place in furtherance of a contract. So, in a way, what point 3 is trying to tell you is that Transfer of Property Act is a legislation that goes hand in hand with the law of contract. It in a way completes the code of the law of contract. How can we say so? If you look at the law of contract, principally and generally, the law of contract is also something which is governed by consent of parties. There is an offer, there is an acceptance, there is a consideration. Between whom? Parties. Everything is being decided by parties. So, Transfer of Property Act is also a legislation that is dealing with the acts of parties. So, even though there was an act governing contractual arrangements between persons, there was no act governing a transfer in the furtherance of a contract or transfers at all. And therefore, the Transfer of Property Act in a way is complementary to the law of contract. Okay? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Point 4. By making provisions for inter vivos transfers, the Transfer of Property Act has provided a law parallel to the already existing laws of testamentary and intestate transfers, that is, transfer of property under wills and under the law of inheritance. What is an inter vivos transfer?
Sir, gifts
Transfer
between living
between-
people.
By the act of the parties.
Inter vivos, what does it literally mean?
Transfer by a living person.
Between
Two?
living persons. Two living
Between
persons.
living
Transfer
persons.
between two living persons.
Yes, or if you are right, these are transfers between two living persons. That is what is known as inter vivos transfer. So, provisions for inter vivos transfers are made in the Transfer of Property Act, and it goes parallel to the laws of testamentary and intestate transfers. So, Transfer of Property Act is not holding a space unto itself alone. It is a legislation that is holding space in consonance with various other legislations. Do you think in today's day and age it is possible for there to be stand-alone legislations where one legislation alone holds the field and no other legislation can hold the field?
No, sir.
Evidence Act, sir.
Yes, Prashant? किस किस के कान फूटे इससे? प्रशांत, we couldn't hear anything you said. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I was talking about Evidence Act, since Evidence Act is exhaustive in terms of some evidences.
So you are saying that evidence law is, in a way, is a standalone piece of legislation, is it?
Yes, sir.
So what
Sir-
about the IT Act?
But sir, evidence law itself has interface with the other laws, no?
Yes, electronic evidence, IT Act being read with evidence.
Sir, even sir, some provisions of CRPC as well.
So let me give you an example, a more specific example. Is a civil suit a standalone kind of an exercise? Say a suit for a temporary injunction over a property, a permanent injunction for over a property, and an application moved for temporary injunction. Don't you think that is very well settled within the CPC?
No,
And
sir.
between-
Limitation Act needs to be referred.
But sir,
Limitation Act needs to be referred.
and
Even
it's
sir,
also in
specific
relation to
relief act.
Specific Relief Act.
Yeah.
Okay, Specific Relief Act, Limitation Act. So, Limitation Act is a kind of an argument that will come into any kind of suit or writ petition. So that by itself tells us that it will always be two legislations, even when we think it is one.
Yes, sir.
Apart from limitation and specific relief, Section 41, is there anything else that can ever come in the way of anyone seeking temporary injunction or anyone defending temporary injunction?
Sir, stamp duty.
Okay, stamp duty,
Sir, maybe
Procedural.
Registration Act.
procedural registration, anything else?
Sir, this Transfer of Property Act.
Certainly. I was looking for this also. And anything else?
So
Can there ever
Succession
be
Act.
an injunction against the true owner?
No, sir.
No, sir.
In no circumstance can there be
Sir,
an
it
injunction.
can be.
Yes, there can be.
How? Against the
If a
true
property-
owner.
If there is a dispute in the property, so the court can pass an injunction
Against the true owner.
unless and until like the court has verified like everything is settled, then only he is a true
If
owner.
the court is of the view that the owner is the true owner, can the court pass an injunction against the true owner?
Then only if an appeal has been filed, sir.
I think no, sir, because general rule is that ki no injunction can be filed against the true owner.
General rule. You mean general rule, or there is a general rule civil, if you know, in civil law?
I think the latter one, general.
Okay. So, Raju, you also said the injunction is possible against the true owner.
Yes, sir.
How?
So suppose there is a tenant and he was authorized to, build something, and then thereafter the owner interferes, then he can file
No, he can file.
application. But
And
yeah,
you think he can get also against the true owner?
sir, if he is authorized by the owner, then
Can there ever be an injunction against the true owner when there is no authorization?
I don't know about this, sir.
The other 25 of you?
Sir, I have a question. What if there's a scenario when the government has asked, the government requires a certain sort of infrastructure to be built or not to be built, or any improvements are to be made in a particular property, and the owner of the property goes against such requirements, then can injunction be sought?
The right to property, I'm sure some of you might know, was a fundamental right in the original Indian constitution. And
Yes,
from
sir.
fundamental, it was
Yes, sir.
demoted and it was made a general constitutional right. In Article 300,
300A.
300A, Article 300 capital A. So, the government of India, if it requires land, it has special powers to go and acquire such land. There is the Land Acquisition Act. There is the doctrine of fair compensation that they have to provide. However, if they require land for a public purpose, they can do so, and it is the other party at best can find fault with it if it violates his fundamental rights, or if he can make out a case to that effect. But my question is different. My question is, can there be an injunction against the true owner when there is no such authorization by the true owner?
But sir, if it's a case of fraud or dishonest, like if a true owner is playing a fraud on someone else, then an injunction can be passed against him.
Him in his own property?
Yes, sir. So like if he's trying to sell the property to multiple sellers, then an injunction can be passed against him, even if he's a true owner. Say if I own, if I possess this mobile phone, I'm selling a mobile phone to three other persons, three different people. So then an
Do you think
injunction.
that will be more a cause of action in criminal law, 420, 406?
But it can also count to civil law also, right? Then an
If a
injunction
man
can
is
be.
trying to, certainly. But I am talking to you from a point of law perspective. What you are essentially sharing with me is a possibility,
Yes, sir.
but a factual kind of a possibility. As a point of law, is an injunction possible against the true owner?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
If the creditor wants to recover the money from the debtor, uh,
Hmm.
then he can ask the court for seeking the order of injunction if the debtor is selling the property or getting the property on lease, something of
Yes.
that sort.
So what you are saying, Komal, is also in the lines of what Dinesh was saying, that certain circumstances exist, debtor creditor kind of circumstances, authorization, wrongful conduct,
Yes, sir.
to prevent another greater harm kind of a situation, generally in law. In such situations, injunction orders are passed left, right, and center as they should be. But generally, is there an injunction possible against the true owner?
No, sir.
Sir, yes, I think
How?
yes. Sir, in government related matters where highway buildings and other things like this,
Okay.
government related matters.
Okay. So let me change my question then. Suppose there is no government related matter. कुछ government relation का है ही नहीं. private parties. Is injunction possible?
Sir, injunction is possible, but there should be special circumstances.
Not as a general rule.
Sir.
So,
Sir, I think yes. Don't know the reason, but I think yes.
देखो, I'm happy I asked this question, even though it was not a purely Transfer of Property Act question. But transfer of property goes a lot with civil law generally.
Yes.
And फंडे are not good. आप लोगों के injunctions are not possible, is not possible against the true owner. Like I'm asking you from a legal proposition point of view, जो किसी चीज का true owner है, अगर कोर्ट ऐसी finding दे रही है, yes you are the true owner, then it is highly unlikely some heavens falling situation where the court might say that yet I injunct you for various reasons जो आप लोगों ने बताई, which is good. मतलब some of the reasons that some of you gave. However, as a point of law, an injunction is never possible against a true owner. This is settled law. Why? Because they truly own the land. If tomorrow I am installing a new gate instead of where my current gate is within my own property, and my neighbor comes and says, "You are in," files a suit for permanent injunction against me, I can go to court and say I am the true owner of this property. I am doing what I want to do in my property. And I can plead that I am the owner and therefore no injunction is possible against me. So injunction is not possible against the true owner in general circumstances, except the specific circumstances जो आप लोगों ने कुछ lay down करे. And there is another very interesting example which I was thinking one of you might bring up. It is a very recent Supreme Court judgment of I think of the 15th of October 2020, Satish Chandra Ahuja versus Sneha Ahuja. It's a landmark case where the Supreme Court has said that even if the in-laws own the property. Okay, so even if the in-laws own the property, the daughter-in-law, without having ownership, will still have rights of possession. So you can't dispossess her. So even though you may not be transferring ownership to the daughter-in-law, you're in effect transferring lifelong possession, which interferes with the enjoyment of true ownership. So why I'm giving you these examples is that there is an interplay of various laws, as you have also yourself pointed out, but principally injunction is not possible against the true owner.
But sir, can we say that is this rule applicable to Cooperative Societies Act? Because
yes,
okay, right now over here, even if I'm a true owner of a flat, but as per the, I think it was Bombay High Court judgment, it says though I'm a true owner of a flat, but I'm a tenant of the society, I have to like an injunction can be passed against me even if I'm a true owner, because like my property belongs to the society.
True. See, I'm not saying injunctions can never be passed against true owners. They can always, and they have been.
Yes,
However, as a general rule of law, injunction cannot be passed against the true owner.
Okay, sir.
Right?
Yes,
as in the true owner is someone who has ownership over the said property, and therefore they are entitled to do what they want to do. Generally. Then there comes special circumstances which all of you have narrated. Okay?
Okay, sir. Understood.
Any questions before we come to scope?
Sir, I have one.
Yes.
Sir, since Transfer of Property Act सबसे मतलब पहले आया बाकी act से, तो मतलब why it felt the need to have separate local laws? Like, shouldn't it be the intent of legislation?
Indian Contract Act कब आया?
72 में.
और ये
मतलब I meant sir कि जैसे land laws जो बाद में आई, Transfer Property Act के बाद में आए, जैसे rent control land, they also deal with the land. So my question is कि sir legislation का ऐसा intent नहीं होना चाहिए कि let's consolidate all the acts so that it won't let rise to new acts बार बार. So matlab, was it for the convenience of Britishers or something like that?
Certainly, it was for the convenience of the British.
Sir, every law is for the convenient of British.
That is a correct observation that you have made, Priyanshi. But apart from the convenience of the British, this was an effect to have a national law on something which is essentially driven by local administrations. India, as you know, was all over the place as kingdoms and provinces and talukas, and therefore Transfer of Property Act in a way was the first pan-national legislation governing how to have such transfers effected. Local laws were holding the field. Therefore, जो बाद में legislations आए, they came towards the end to simply deal with to accommodate the local forces. There are various customary rights pertaining to property in different places. For example, the scheduled tribe community here is not allowed to sell their own land unless they have written permission from the district magistrate. If you read the UP ZALR Act, the Uttar Pradesh Zamindari Abolition and Land Reforms Act, it's a 1970s legislation, there are various things about ownership and transfer which are unique to only UP and also Uttarakhand.
I think so. Himachal recently passed a law like person domicile of outside Himachal cannot be an owner in the state of Himachal.
Yes, this is also there.
I think
some states have laws like that.
And sir, even here in Mumbai, I think there are many societies. Like one, I remember a case, a specific Jain society. Like like if you want to be a owner of the like flat in this society, it can be bought only by a Jain, not by any like XYZ. Any other community is allowed for that matter.
Sir, can this be possible? That a society can only, the house in a society can only be purchased by a Jain only and not of other caste or
because
religion.
It falls under Societies Act.
Okay.
The society can form its own rule and everything.
Dinesh, I am not very sure. I'll have to see. मुझे एक बार ऐसा ये judgment भेज देना, because this looks patently violative of Article 14.
Sir, बॉम्बे में इतना भर के sir. Actually इसके ऊपर बहुत सही judgments है. I'll still search and I'll forward it, sir. क्योंकि जहाँ तक पता है, क्योंकि I think there are many like cases where for such instances which has been filed in the court, फिर कोर्ट ने हेल्ड किया था कि like this Societies Act के अंदर a society can form its own rules and regulation.
Certainly. Yeah. अब जैसे the point here would be about say Articles 29 and 30 of the Constitution as well. Minority status of institutions, if for example if they're educational.
Yes, sir.
That we will be traversing into constitutional questions. Abhi we are dealing with transfer of property.
Yes, sir.
And why the act is not exhaustive. The act is not exhaustive because it cannot be exhaustive humanly. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Achha, there are some questions. So it is not applicable to Dehradun at all. Someone has asked me. In Uttarakhand, we don't have any such provision as we have in Himachal. Then Satish Chandra Ahuja versus Neha Ahuja held that even as you prefer a civil suit, you can also simultaneously prefer a remedy for domestic violence. And through domestic violence, you can get rights of possession. Now, this is something alien, no? You can still say Stamp Act, registration, they go together. But say domestic violence and CPC, someone is talking about a DV Act of 2005, and now a DV Act provision can give you rights of possession. And the court has said in Satish Chandra Ahuja that both you can take simultaneously. Has anyone read that judgment?
Yes, sir.
Would someone want to present it? It's a very interesting judgment. Very interesting judgment.
Sir, I would want to do that.
Okay, Monica, please take it up and please try to present it in the next class.